everybody, welcome back to the Mash and Drum Whiskey Room. My name is Jason C. Want to thank everyone again for watching and subscribing, getting a lot of great feedback in the comments. I really appreciate it. Today I'm pretty excited. I'm having something that I've never tried before. It's kind of a weird category of whiskey, but excited to open it and try it with you guys. This is the Woodford Reserve Straight Malt Whiskey. And before we go any further, let's get a closer look. Alright guys, bet you got a closer look at the bottle there. You'll see that this bottle is pretty close to their other bottles. This is now going to be a mainstay in the Woodford Reserve line of whiskeys, along like this guy, the Double Oaked, which I really like. It's one of the first bourbons I ever had. Kind of set me off on my bourbon journey. So what's interesting about this straight malt whiskey is that the category in the US doesn't really officially exist yet, which I found really interesting. So when I was doing my research on the bottle, the single malt whiskey category in the US has gotten a lot of publicity, and there have been some really amazing whiskeys that have come out underneath the single malt moniker, like Stranahan's and Balcones US 1 single malt, which I think is delicious. But since the category doesn't really officially exist, there's a huge push for it by the American Single Malt Commission. So the American Single Malt for them must be made from 100% malted barley, distilled at one distillery, mash distilled and matured in the US, matured in oak, not exceeding 700 liters, distilled to no more than 160 proof, and bottled at 80 proof or higher. So, although the single malt whiskey uses very similar rules to what they use for Scotch in Scotland, the maturation is going to be way different just because of the weather, the extreme weather conditions we get here in the US rather than what they get in Scotland. So, the climate plays a big role in how the whiskey is going to age. All right, so now that we got single malt whiskey kind of covered in the US, let's now talk about just malted whiskey in the US, which is a product that's been kind of rarely made. So malt whiskeys in the US must be made with a mash bill of at least 51% malted barley, which is kind of similar to bourbon because bourbon has to be made with 51% corn, so you're just kind of switching the recipe around. But malted whiskey will still have corn and rye in the mash bill as well. Again, it has to be distilled to no more than 160 proof, has to be aged at no more than 125 proof, and has to be aged in brand new charred oak barrels. So similar rules to bourbon, but again, not many makers make this. The only other one I could find was from back in 2015, Heaven Hills Park Heritage made an 8-year American whiskey that had a mash bill of at least 51% malted barley. So I never got a chance to try that, didn't even really know it existed until I did the research. So I'm excited to really try this with you guys. So let's get into it. There we go. Good pop. Kind of squeaky though. All right, let's get a good pour in here. Always a generous pour. Always, always. Okay, here we go. So this is made from 51% malted barley, 47% corn, and 2% rye. This is 90.4 proof. It's 45.2 ABV. This came out in June 1st, I believe, of this year. And it's only about 35 bucks. So won't really break the bank, so I'm really kind of curious to see what we get out of it. So let's go to the nose. I mean, it does not smell like a bourbon, so right off the bat, that's kind of interesting. I didn't really expect it to, but it's pretty fruit forward. Has a lot of fruit character to it. You do get some bourbon notes in there. You get some caramel, but it's really light. It's not that dark caramel that you're kind of used to with bourbon. You do get a little bit of the oak. There's a chocolatey note to it, maybe even cocoa powder, but something definitely a mild chocolate I get. Wow, really interesting. All right, so we have fruit chocolate, a little bit of light caramel. All right, let's get in for the taste. I'm excited. Cheers, everybody. Wow, so on the first sip that I get, I am getting more of a fruit character. It is definitely, it's definitely different. I'm trying to get the notes here on my first sip, but let me go for that second sip. This one's tough. Oh, there we go. Okay. So now I am getting some typical bourbon notes in there. Not so much vanilla, but I am getting the caramel. You're getting the wood a little bit. But there is a kind of a chocolate-covered fruit thing going on that is kind of taking over. It's really interesting. It's good. I'm kind of enjoying this. Let me go in for another sip. I'm getting those nutty characteristics. There's still that little bit of cocoa powder, that chocolate. Kind of the fruitiness to it. You do taste the barley. So Chris Morris, the master distiller at Woodford Reserve, when I was doing some research, he said that he wanted to create a malted whiskey for people that don't really like Scotch. And I think with the flavor profile of this, I think he's, he might have hit on something. It's not, it definitely doesn't taste like Scotch, but you can taste the different recipe and the barley that's in there. But you are getting some typical bourbon notes, which is pretty interesting. So now that it kind of sat a little bit, now it's definitely has changed a little bit just from sitting just a little bit in this glass here. I'm still getting that cocoa, but now the caramels kind of go away, and it's definitely becoming more fruit forward. It's light, it's sweet, it's an easy drinker. It's really not doing a number, down into my chest area here. It's pretty good. It's surprising, and for $35, I think it's a really interesting addition. I think to the Woodford Reserve line. I think this expression it definitely has a place. Would I personally, drink this every day? Probably not. Probably want to drink some regular bourbon, but I think this is a really good, something different. And I know the Scotch test dummies that review this, and they seem to like this. And those guys really, love their Scotch. But I think Bart and Scott both like this a lot. So yeah, for $35, if you find it, I would recommend picking it up. I think it's a really good. It's just something different to try, and with not many of these types of whiskeys being out there, cheers to Woodford for doing a pretty good job. All right, so with that, guys, I want to thank you for stopping by my channel again. I have a really cool announcement on this Wednesday, August 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be doing my first live stream, which is pretty exciting. Hopefully all goes well. I'll be teaming up with Scott from My Bourbon Journey, and we'll be talking about some things about our channel, maybe some upcoming reviews, and I'm excited to kind of take your questions and kind of interact with everybody out there. So really appreciate it, and looking forward to talking more on Wednesday night. So with that, as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. Cheers, everybody.